Hey guys, this is Neff, and this is a redo tutorial for the keyframes and leaping ball tutorials. So there were a couple of things that we need to go over that I've noticed that a lot of people have been running into. So first off
Go.
is we're going to do this animation of my friend
Okay, again.
Isaac here hopping over, but we're going to do it in the form of a ball. So I want you to notice a couple
Go.
of things. I want you to notice his idle pose, and then him anticipating a jump. Notice the direction that he's going to go and jump in. And I want you to notice how slightly, for a split second, he's kind of, almost standing up straight with the exception of his um, legs being bent. Just imagine this in a ball. What rotation would this be in, right? And then when he lands, the general direction of his body is just going at this angle right here, and then he stands up straight, right? So we're gonna do that with our ball animation. So we're gonna go ahead and start off with Autodesk Maya, and we're gonna give it a second for it to load up. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and start off by going to File and Save Scene As, and we're gonna call this leaping underscore ball underscore redo. First name underscore last name underscore 01. And we're gonna save this as a Maya ASC2 file. And we click continue. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and start off by going to the front profile view. If you don't know what the front one is, look at the bottom where it says front, and you shall find the front profile view. You can press the space bar to get there. And we're going to make a ball in the poly mode. Then as soon as we get the ball, we're going to press D and we're going to press V in that same order, and then we're going to drag this pivot point down. This is going to allow me to rotate the ball from this point in space. Okay, this is the center of gravity for this one ball. Then what we're going to do is we're going to press X. This allows me to snap lock our ball onto the grid. So we're going to find where this ball is actually located. So it looks like we need to bring the ball down, and we want it to sit on the grid. So now it's sitting on my grid, as you can see on my perspective view. So what I'm going to do now is I want this to be my default pose. So if I ever mess up, I can always come back to this pose. So I'm going to go to modify. You can find this at the top menu. And I'm going to click modify, and I'm going to go to the third option down. This is called freeze transformation. This is going to freeze all my values so I can go back to 0, and I will always go back to my default pose and my default location. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to start animating. So for this, we're going to record our point. So this is going to be our idle pose. If we go back and look at Isaac's jump, oops, he has this idle pose right here, so he's doing absolutely nothing. So we'll go back to our Autodesk Maya. So this is what we're going to save. The ball is doing absolutely nothing. So we're going to save that. And then we're going to skip a couple of frames. If you have a timeline like mine that's really stretched out that you can't individually select a frame, you can use this little bar on the bottom and condense your timeline so you can see each individual frame. We're going to work at 24 frames a second, so you don't have to go 30 frames to get from one frame to the next. So we're going to get Isaac, and we're going to see how long he takes. So not very long, from point 1 to point 2 right here. Not very long. Let's anticipate this being about 3 frames. There's no science to this. You just have to eyeball it. right? And he's also anticipating, so he's gonna squash a little bit. So we're squashing, and we're gonna lose volume here when we squash, so we need to regain that volume. This is part of the squash. He's not gonna get fat or anything. He's using the same amount of space that he's using before. Right? So I might need to squash him a little bit more. Because we have a big anticipation here, that means he's gonna leap really, really far. So I'm gonna go to 6 frames. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frames over, and I'm gonna anticipate this arc looking like it's gonna go around here. So I'm gonna go ahead and save that right there. And I also want to mimic how Isaac was almost standing up straight at this point in time. Right? His rotation value, if you were to rotate him, it's practically a 0, right? With a slight tilt. So, and we also, he's not really doing any much squash. You can see his legs are bent, but that's because he doesn't want to touch the ground. So we're going to do this as a 1. And we want to keep those rotation values at 0 for later on. So we're going to save that. We're going to land a little bit short than what he did going up, because it takes a lot more energy to go up than it does to go down. By default, everything is falling, right? So if whatever it is you're standing on is no longer there, you will just keep falling. So this took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frames. So we're gonna do 4 to 5 frames. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm gonna do 5. I like them. You know what? Let's do 5. And then we're going to be this, and we're going to make this the bottom of our arc. We also want this to squash, because that energy's got to go somewhere. Right? So we're going to squash, and we're going to look back and make sure that's about the same size, the same amount of volume on there. Maybe just a tad bit more squash, and then that's it. Alright? Then we want to make sure he regains this. We're going to do what I call a jello move. So we're going to go ahead, and he's going to regain that, but he's going to regain that this small stretch, and then he's going to squash again, and each squash and stretch gets less and less, and you want to ease out from that jello effect until he's almost not squashing or stretching. So by 23 he should be a solid 1, right? And we're going to save that. Alright, so let's look at what we have now. Nice and lively. We still have a couple of problems that we need to address. Now we need to address the direction that the ball is facing. Notice how our model Isaac here, he's anticipating the direction of where he's going to jump. Because he's pointing forward, we know he's not going to jump backwards. He may jump backwards, but that's not what he does in this video. We know he's going to jump in this general direction, so he's pointing that way. When he lands, he's doing the opposite. Right? His body is kind of still in the direction from where he came from. Right? So we're going to do that with our ball. So not with our default pose, we're not going to do any rotation values, but in our anticipation pose, we're going to anticipate the direction that he's going to jump. So we're going to go ahead and save that in frame 3. And so we're going to look at that, right? And then he's going to fall, and when he falls in frame 13, we're going to point the ball in the general direction he came from, right? And then he's going to regain that. So let's look at that. See how it kind of looks a little bit lively? And that's what we want to do. Now here's a couple of problems that I did see in our animations that we'll address. So we're going to go ahead and save this, and we're going to look at some examples of things that we need to be careful when animating, and some rookie mistakes, which are okay because we barely started animating. If you're watching this tutorial, I assume you just started animating. So here are a couple of things. We don't have to do anything special with this ball, but I do want to address some things I saw. So here's my frame 1, and I wanted to jump, and I'm going to go there, and I'm going to go to frame 2, right? Oops. I'm going to go to frame 2, and I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to go to frame 3, and I'm going to go to where the ball is going to land, right? What I saw was people doing this, right? And this is not a very good way to animate. Yes, you can animate this way, but because we are going 24 frames a second, the computer doesn't have any time to interpolate any of the frames in between frames 1, 2, and 3. And so literally we are looking this animation at 24 frames a second. So we are looking at these poses at a fraction of the second. So you'll often have these really weird jerky and strobing effects that happens whenever you animate in this mode, right? Don't do that. Spread out your keyframes, and if you want to have a bouncing ball, you can. Just animate them, spread them around, and anticipate how much time does each pose take, right? So it's going to take longer to go up than it will to go down. You see this smooth animation? Also, the more keyframes there are in an animation, the more dirty animation you get, the more jerkier your animation is going to look like. It's not going to do the things you want it to do. It's going to look very, very inconsistent, especially the long animations. So what you want to do is keep your animations clean, and you want to keep as least amount of keyframes as possible, right? We'll look at different things later on as your animation gets complicated to clean up your animation. But as an example, I can look at all the values that I've set inside my graph editor here, and I can clean up my animation and select separate controls to clean my animation based on what I wanted to do in three-dimensional space, right? But we're not at that point yet, and there's no need to be creating unnecessary keyframes. So keep your animation clean and keep your keyframes in a very good pace and distance. If it looks wrong, then it's wrong. If it looks right, then it's right. You also want to look at your animation and your model at different directions. So sometimes an animation looks really odd in one angle, but it looks really well in a different angle. So sometimes the problems with your animation is the way you frame it. You also want to keep in mind how your entire and full composition is going to look like at the end. If it looks right from the angle you're going to export in, there's no need to change the angle. Alright? So if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the space below. And be sure to subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.